Hej och välkomna tillbaka. Vi är inne på vårt andra pass för dagen. Mats Hård heter jag är moderator fram till lunch. Jag är till vardags vd och grundare för Finwire som är en finansiell nyhetsbyrå. Vi skriver börsnyheter och jag har jobbat med börsfrågor i hela mitt vuxna liv. Under det här passet fram till lunch så kommer vi ha ganska stor tyngdvikt vid life science. Passande här i just den här delen av Lund. Första bolaget som står på scen är Alligator Bioscience och vd Søren Bregenholt. Välkommen. Han kör igång, jag kommer tillbaka sen och ställer frågor.
Yeah, bra. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to do this presentation in English. My Swedish is okay for conversation, but for this, I think we're all better off with me talking English. So, Alligator Bioscience is a local Lund company completely focused on developing drugs in cancer, in immuno-oncology, trying to treat some of those difficult diseases out there. We do that through a number of exciting molecules that all have the characteristic that they stimulate the immune system. To develop these products and to allow us to continue to develop innovative products, we have a number of underlying technology platforms. I'll not talk about that today, but when you think about Alligator and the exciting data that we show today, just keep in mind that we will continue to innovate innovative drugs for people with hard-to-treat cancers. We are located in Lund, just 500 meters down the road here, and we are listed at the Nasdaq in Stockholm. As I said, we have a very interesting pipeline. Our lead asset, mitazalimab, is in phase 2 clinical development in pancreatic cancer, a horrific disease, and we really believe that mitazalimab can make a difference in pancreatic cancer. And I'll spend most of this morning's talk on mitazalimab, why we believe it's a potential breakthrough treatment in pancreatic cancer, and some of the recent data that we published in the beginning of the year. In addition to mitazalimab, we have a number of other drugs in phase 1 clinical development or just about to enter phase 1 clinical development. You see them there in the middle. I'll not talk about those much today. Just putting the message out that these drugs are both good opportunities for Alligator to divest assets and get non-dilutive income into the company, but also potentially as future growth engines. Where we see the future of Alligator Bioscience is to use all the success we currently have with mitazalimab and consolidate and expand our leadership within what we call the CD40 field. And for that, we have developed a platform called Neo-X Prime. And the first molecule on that platform is just about to enter preclinical development. So that's very exciting. And over the coming years, we continue and we look forward to continuing the development and share exciting data with you. But today's main topic is going to be mitazalimab. Mitazalimab is a so-called agonist. It's a molecule that stimulates the immune system, and it especially addresses a molecule called CD40 on a number of cells that are sort of the key switches or master switches of the immune system. And that is extremely important because it's really the cells, the orange cells you have there, the so-called dendritic cells, that educates, activates, and also attracts cells into the tumor that eventually kills the tumor cells and thereby give a tumor response and hopefully give a clinical benefits to the patients. Also, another cell type in this is addressed by mitazalimab. You can see them there in blue-grayish. They're called macrophages. They're also regulating the immune system either in a negative way or in a positive way. And mitazalimab changes these cells so they become sort of avid supporters of the immune system, and their activity on these two cells together allows us to drive very efficient immune responses in pancreatic cancer. And from a cartoon point of view, it looks like this. Three important mechanisms. First of all, mitazalimab activates these so-called macrophages. And what they do initially is that they start degrading the connective tissue in the tumor, see a pancreatic cancer as a very, very solid tumor, almost like a fist here. And when you give mitazalimab initially to these patients, the tumor will start to become more permeable, both to subsequent chemotherapy, to more mitazalimab, and also to T cells. And what then happens eventually is that mitazalimab activates the dendritic cells, as we talked about, activating T cells that comes into the tumor and start killing the tumor cells. And then as the third mechanism, as I said, we activate the macrophages to then support that ongoing immunity. And as you can see, the hypothesis here is that the immune system eventually will destroy the tumor. We did a quite extensive phase 1 study with mitazalimab in patients with solid tumors, so all different kind of solid tumors. And that study gave us actually some pretty important information. First of all, as you can see here on the slide, I'm not going to go into details, but what we showed very strongly was that mitazalimab activates both those dendritic cells that we talked about before, the macrophages that we talked about before, and also the T cells. And the data shows this in various assays. So this means that the hypothesis that we built around mitazalimab and how it would work is confirmed in human beings. What we also saw in this phase 1 trial was that the drug was safe and well tolerated. And as we'll talk about in a second, having a drug that is safe and well tolerated is very, very important when you're going to combine with chemotherapy, which gives in itself a lot of side effects. So you don't really want to add side effects on top of that. And mitazalimab is, as I said, very safe and well tolerated and fits very well in that context. So let's talk a little bit about pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is one of the hardest cancers to treat. Approximately 400,000 new cases every year. Of those, 200,000 in the US and Europe, what we call the main markets. Only 20% of these patients are eligible for surgery. That means we have in Europe and US approximately 160,000 people every year that gets a cancer that we can only treat with chemotherapy. And even with chemotherapy, the prognosis is pretty dark for these patients. As you can see, after 5 years, approximately only 10% are still alive, and the sort of median overall survival without treatment in these patients is around half a year. So we think there is a lot of potential to make a positive difference for these patients. When we look at what is offered to them in first line, it's two different types of chemotherapy. One is called FOLFIRINOX, that is given to the most physical fit of these patients. Remind you that these are still grade 4 patients with metastasis in various tissues, often in the liver. But mitazalimab or FOLFIRINOX is given to those of the patients that are better off. And the reason why that is given only to those patients is because it has the harshest side effects, and therefore is only given to these patients that can physically tolerate the treatment. So mitazalimab, as I said, is in first-line pancreatic cancer therapy. Important to be able to test your drug in first line. So actually mitazalimab is the first drug that the patient sees after diagnosis. We have designed a trial where we utilize or leverage the fact that mitazalimab is very efficacious but also very safe. That allows us to combine with the strongest of the chemotherapies. It allows us to dose more frequently than our competitors, and it also allows us to dose at higher doses than our competitors, all in all giving us a better opportunity to show that mitazalimab gives a clinical benefit to these patients and eventually becomes a commercially attractive and viable opportunity. Very briefly about the phase 2 trial, a couple of points here. It's currently recruiting. It's going on in France, Belgium, and Spain. And if you look at the cartoon here, what you'll notice on your furthest left is that the first drug, as I said, that the patient gets in this treatment regime is actually mitazalimab. And that is important because that gives us the opportunity to start sort of working with the tumor to get it more permeable. It gives us a chance to prime the immune system, thereby giving us the best chance of a response. And then you can see then every second week, the patients are getting mitazalimab at the same time as they get their chemotherapy. This is important that we do this on the same day to ensure that the patients are only getting to the hospital not more often that they actually need to give the patients the best life outside of the treatment, and we believe that this is a key feature when we get the drug further on to development and into the market. The trial then read out data early January, very early January on January 2nd, and what we saw from that trial was that when we sort of compared our initial response with the current chemotherapies out there, the chemotherapy that I discussed was called FOLFIRINOX. As you can see, approximately 32% of the patients that are getting FOLFIRINOX gets a clinical response. And the hypothesis here was actually, or the aim with the treatment was two things: get more patients to respond, that's number one, and eventually show that these patients respond better and respond longer than chemotherapy alone. So the first data set that we got out is that where the chemotherapy alone gives a response in approximately 32% of the patients, we could show that more than 50% of the patients actually had a clinical response, meaning that the tumor was shrinking in for instance, their liver metastasis. So this is a very, very significant response, and we really believe that this will drive also a better durability and eventually a better overall survival of these patients. When we then looked further into the data, it was also evident that we had what is called a disease control rate. So that's the combined number of patients where the tumor starts to shrink and the number of patients where the tumor stops to grow. And as you can see there, we were actually able to provide benefit to 91% or 21 out of the 23 patients that we actually treated in the first part of the trial. And this is very, very significant. And on the third line there, you can see we were able to confirm the safety of the drug, which means that we now know that we can safely combine mitazalimab with FOLFIRINOX in these pancreatic cancer patients, and thereby hopefully be able to provide a significant clinical benefit to these patients, initially in the clinical trial, of course, and hopefully later on with a marketed product. Talking about a marketed product, what does the commercial outlook for mitazalimab look like? We have made sort of some early modulations using a very conservative price estimate of around $5,000 US per month. Let me remind you that some of the other immuno-oncology drugs are sold at $10,000, maybe $12,000 a month. So this is a conservative estimate. And if we model around what we see with chemotherapy alone, we can see a peak sale of mitazalimab of approximately between $1.5 and $3.5 billion US dollars. And based on the data that we sent out early January, we have seen a very strongly increased interest from various pharmaceutical companies and big global biotechs who can see an opportunity to partner with Alligator or license mitazalimab to get this drug moved forward into phase 3 clinical development and eventually to the patients. So what are the upcoming milestones and priorities for mitazalimab? We, as I said, put out data January 2nd. We expect to come out with a more mature data cut mid-year, and then we are working hard with our clinical sites to ensure that we get the last patients into the trial so we can report data sometimes Q1 2024, the full top-line data from the study. We're of course working hard to see if we can do this even earlier. Then we are engaging with regulatory authorities, both the US and Europe, to ensure that we find the most optimal development path for mitazalimab into phase 3 and onto the market. I put a phase 3 start tentatively here sometimes in 2024. That can be earlier, that can be a little bit later. We need to see. And we are, of course, also working hard with the regulators, discussing orphan drug designation, breakthrough designation, fast track status, and all these regulatory incentives that will make it easier, faster, and cheaper to bring the drug forward towards the market. And then we are, of course, intensifying our discussions with partners. So a very, very busy and very, very exciting year for mitazalimab, and also for the rest of Alligator's portfolio. We, of course, while we're doing all this, working hard to create value across our other products and collaborations. And with these words, I'll thank you and welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Søren.
A pleasure.
Jag vill påminna alla, om man har några frågor till Søren och Alligator Bioscience, så kan man smsa in det till honom, så tar jag upp det här på scen. I'll start off with some questions. I think, of course, the study is, of course, focus. You say that you will present top-line results Q1 next year.
Yeah.
And Q2 this year, you will have some midterm data, right? Or
Mid-year.
Yeah.
That could be late Q2, early Q3. I mean, June, July timeframe, yeah?
To the summer,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, I mean, obviously, I think everyone is interested in your process. If the data keeps being as good as I guess you hope.
Yeah.
You have stated that you want to talk to the authorities to speed up the process. What do you mean when you're trying to speed up the development process of?
So the dialogue with the regulators are, of course, focused first of all understanding. We have our own minds and our own ideas and our own understanding, but confirm and discuss that understanding on, first of all, how does a phase 3 trial look? Yeah. How many patients? How long? We are pretty certain what the endpoints are. They are progression-free survival and eventually median overall survival. So 2 important endpoints there. With a drug like mitazalimab, the data that we see here and the medical need, a crucial discussion with the FDA is, of course, also what's called an accelerated approval. Yeah. So the opportunity to actually market and sell the drug based on phase 2 data while you're running your phase 3, which of course makes the opportunity much more interesting both for pharma and also for Alligator itself. But that requires some discussion about the agency's expectations of the data towards the end.
Yeah, and you still need to, I guess the authorities want to see more data, right?
They surely want to see more data, absolutely, and so do we. Yeah. And we expect that the data will mature, continue to show what we have already seen, and translate that into progression-free survival. So how long do the patient live before the tumor start to grow again? And what is called overall survival, which is actually how long do the patients live?
Yeah. So a progression with the authorities, I think you should expect that something will happen during the second half, right? You need to have more data and more evidence, I guess.
That's an excellent point. Dialogues with the regulators are most productive when you have solid data, and we have early solid data, but we will have a little bit more data before we engage with the regulators on discussing phase 3. Orphan drug designation and some of the other incentives can be discussed already now.
Yeah. When it comes to patients and recruitment to your study, how is that developing?
That's developing well. We have been recruiting steadily. We had a pick up a couple of months ago, which was really, really good. And initially, the timeline for reporting top-line data was late 24, and as a testament to the operational capability of my organization, we're actually able to cut 9 months of that timeline. So that's going very, very well. And I think we can expect to have the trial fully recruited late Q1, a week into Q. I mean, let's see about that, but around March, April time.
Okay, so you don't see any risks for delays?
No, actually not. No. I can tell you that the physicians that are recruiting patients, they were very, very excited when they saw these data.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good marketing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's always easier when you have good data.
Yeah. And another question, it's about your finances. I mean, a study, of course, costs a lot of resources. And how is the need for cash at Alligator?
So first of all, there is always need for cash in biotech. I mean, developing drug is cash intensive, and Alligator will we will refinance the company during a first half of this year. No doubt about it. I think it's very clear now we have a lead project here that is worth investing in. It has shown good data so far, and up from an operational point of view, we are 100% on track. So there's no sort of risk associated, significant risk associated with that.
Yeah, of course. You had one. You were actually talking a little bit about the interest from other pharmaceutical companies after your data. What to expect if you are a shareholder and interest in your company? Is that you're gonna look for a partnership in the long term, or could you give some flavor on that?
Yeah, I can. I think. I mean, mitazalimab. Now we have data in pancreatic cancer. We also have strong preclinical evidence and evidence from our peers that a drug like mitazalimab is not only going to be active in pancreatic cancer, but across a number of different indications. And you could say that Alligator might be able to take mitazalimab into phase 3, but we would not sort of give the drug the ability to sort of fulfill its true commercial potential. So we are looking for a partner, and we're talking to various companies. That can take 3 months, that can take 9 months. The important thing here is that we get a partner that is capable, that is willing to really drive mitazalimab in pancreatic cancer and beyond, and where Alligator and its shareholders gets the best deal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Another question regarding to that is, you mentioned it, but from a strategic point of view, you have two options, as I understand it, that you take your drug to a phase 3 and you finance it by yourselves, or you try to find a partner. Is that correct?
Yeah, and as I said, finding a partner is probably the better way for the drug, the less risky way for Alligator. So that is probably what we are looking into. And such a deal will also allow us to take our third generation molecules, what we call Neo-X Prime, which are currently preclinical, but really use that proceed from such a deal to accelerate the development of the next generation of molecules that build on everything that we do with mitazalimab, and then some very nice innovation on top of that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm happy to come back later another day and talk much more about Neo-X Prime.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience about the share price, which peaked a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And since that, it's significantly lower.
Yeah.
And have something operational changed if you look at your...
A lot. So Alligator has been through a hard time. IPO in 2015-16, a big deal with Janssen. Got mitazalimab back from Janssen, and we had in around 19-20. We had a molecule that failed, which sometimes happen, and the company had a hard time. And in around mid 2021, we had some significant changes. I came on board. We had a few other changes in management. We had a new board, and since then we've really worked hard to restructure the company inside, get out and work hard to get investors' confidence back. And with the data in mitazalimab, the deal we did with Orion also early this year, I really think we are back on track. Still a lot of harder work to do, and I mean, we roll up our sleeves every morning. We get into the office or into the labs and just soldier on.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Søren. We need to move on.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.